Hi there. This is the Debate Clinic. I'm Paul Colby. It's the 14th of November. That's a Thursday. There is a tournament this weekend in Houston at Heights. And so I have a couple of comments for policy debaters and one overview for public forum debaters. So let's get that out of the way real quickly. This topic that you have this week talks about cybersecurity and asks whether benefits or harms are more important when we talk about American use of cybersecurity. In other words, is it offensive? And if so, does it have more benefits than harms? Or, the way I like to look at it, is it mostly defensive and therefore always talking about preventing problems? Well, first thing you need to know is the tools of cybersecurity, the software, the techniques, the devices, those are all pretty much neutral until you decide what you do with them, all right? And if you do something offensive, then you can weigh whether it was worth the effort to do it. If you're using it defensively, you're usually trying to stop something that otherwise might happen. In terms of the things that you would say on the pro side, we think that the benefits outweigh the harms. The problem is that most of those things do not get discussed publicly. They are usually classified. Remember that. When we have something we do on the negative, that is to say, when we defend against a cybersecurity attack of some sort, we might talk about how we did well in defending against that. But of course, you are going to have an issue with whether the biggest threats are from other governments who know we might retaliate if we do something offensively, or against ordinary hackers or groups of hackers, persons or groups, who do something and then extract some sort of blackmail in the form of Bitcoin payments to let somebody have their files back, etc. In a case where you have limited resources and time to do things, it might be more important, you could say, when you are on the con side, that we defend and protect our infrastructure rather than we do something offensive and ask somebody to retaliate because they're mad about what we did. All right? So keep that in mind on the public forum topic. And if you find examples of our offensive efforts that have been tremendously successful so that the benefits outweigh the harms, good luck, because most of those are not talked about. All right, policy debate. Let me make a few points. This is mostly for how you behave in cross-ex, knowing that certain things have happened in the realm of current events. That is to say, if you prepared extensively over the summer or even in September for the affirmative you're running or for the negative position that you're going to defend, news of the last little while has outrun some of the arguments that were there on both positions. So let me give some examples. Ukraine. We talked about Ukraine last week. I hope some of you understood why I distinguished between the direct commercial sales and the foreign military sales. If not, we'll go into that deeper if somebody asks about it. But here's the point. In the current discussion of funding sales of arms to Ukraine, understand that there are two things that jumped out in the headlines in the last couple of weeks. One, how did sales to Ukraine get stalled? They got stalled because the Office of Management and Budget said, let's stop this for a minute. You know, in the raw evidence files we provided and in your own research, you know that it is not the Office of Management and Budget that makes decisions about sales of arms. They are first of all authorized by Congress, and then the president has the ability to step in and do something or other. If he wants to change it or stop it, etc., etc., he has ultimate authority. But what about the Office of Management and Budget? They are not described in any of the legal wording of the statutes that govern arms sales, arms exports, right? Do you see the point there? Mulvaney and OMB are the ones that stalled the sales to Ukraine. If that is true, then you have a solvency argument, because you have somebody without the authority doing something that they are not allowed to do. Secondly, discussions this week in the impeachment arena have to do with people in the State Department saying, have we ever done this before? Talking about holding back the military sales that were already authorized because the president wants something done as a favor. You know how that goes. I'm not going to talk about the anemic Republican defenses. I'm just saying this. The point here is that when you have people in the State Department saying, have we ever done this before? It shows that you are going outside of the authorized pathway for how these decisions are being made, and that's another solvency argument. How do you control somebody who doesn't obey what the legislative arm of the government and what our legal statutes allow them to do? Do you see what I'm saying? You can make this argument. You can say, regardless of whatever positions we have taken, we are now talking about solvency, and for the purposes of argument, how do you stop someone from doing what they are not authorized to do? And in the era of the Trump administration, it's a big issue, because the president does whatever he wants and uses whatever invented methodology he can think of in the instant context to do what he wants to do. So that's the comments on Ukraine. Remember them in terms of solvency, even for cases that are not talking about aid to the Ukraine, that are just talking generally about how you control the sale of arms, all right, from the United States to somebody else. Secondly, Turkey. Think about this for a minute and just keep this in mind when you're being cross-examined, whether it's on a case about Turkey, and I haven't seen that many yet, or just generally speaking. Turkey is a NATO ally. So you would think mostly they get weapons from the United States if they're buying weapons or arms, etc. However, in this case, the President of the United States says we're going to pull back. We are going to stop supporting our allies, the Kurds, in the fight against Syria. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to let Turkey go in to the boundary area that it wants to invoke and get everybody out of the way who is a problem for them. Well, the problem is that, of course, is all of the Kurds. Now, what happens after the president gives a green light for Turkey to do whatever they want to do to the Kurds? Well, the Kurds have to leave and go somewhere, and that's a separate issue where they go, etc., etc. But then what happens? He has Erdogan visit the White House, and while the head of Turkey is in the White House, he shows Republican senators a propaganda video on his iPad, which paints the Kurds as terrorists and so forth and so on. But here's the point. In the meantime, he's going to be buying some missile defenses from the Russians. That's already in the works. Republican senators are saying, no way you can do that and still be in NATO. And so what is the current situation? Well, it's only Thursday, so I can't tell you what the situation is going to be by the weekend or by next week. But look at that. Look at that. We have an ally that's going to buy weapons, missile defense systems from the Russians. Isn't that problematic? Just keep that in mind. For things like cross-X, you need to be aware of what is going on in current events. Current events, let's go to number 3, Boeing. Boeing employs about 1 million people, okay? So you have your standard discussion of disadvantages that have to do with the economy built around providers of defensive weapons or offensive weapons, arms, da-da-da-da-da. Now, Boeing is among the big ones. You have Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and you have Raytheon and General Dynamics, and you have Northrop Grumman. All right. What is distinctive about Boeing? Boeing doesn't just have a bunch of defense contracts. They also have a big commercial business. And that commercial business mostly has to do with producing commercial airliners. And they used to produce other things, but now the new thing on the market is the 737 MAX. And the 737 MAX has been getting bad PR because of 2 crashes that killed a bunch of people. So, the 737 MAX has been off the runway in most airports, especially in the United States, for some time. And the question would be, is this having a giant impact on Boeing economically, who has both commercial and defense products? Well, what you need to keep in mind if you're just going to be current with the news is that recently Boeing has moved things back a bit so that they are likely to have 737 MAX planes flying in the air in January, at least on some of our commercial airliners. And what has been the result of that? There was a stock market boom uptick because of that. So, in anything that talks about, in any format that talks about economics as related to Boeing, you need to be conscious of the fact that, number one, Boeing also has a commercial arm. So, is the commercial arm or is the military sales more vital? Does one affect the other? Constrain it or reduce it in terms of its economic solvency? And then beyond that, what has happened lately? Well, it looks like they're going to be back in there. So if they are, they're going to be vibrant, and successful. But what else happens if somebody says, no, we're not ready to go with all of these 737s? Does that affect somehow all of their military production? And does it ramify in some way? So, as always, we're just saying keep current with the evidence, and I hope everybody has a good tournament this weekend, and I hope if you see this after the tournament, you see that there was some grist for the mill here, some things to think about, and you'll come back and check this later. In the meantime, have a good weekend and a good season.